This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. We continue now our series, The Big Picture. That's when we speak to Oscar nominees who worked behind the camera to make excellent films. The work of our next guest requires a lot of work before the director yells, action, but then you can see his work full throttle. In the film The Substance, from the unforgettable spinal birth scene to the creature at the end of the movie, it's because of special makeup effects by designer Pierre-Olivier Persson. He worked with a team to help achieve the body horror vision of writer Coralie Farjat. He spent hours each day transforming Demi Moore into Elizabeth Sparkle, a movie star who begins aging rapidly after she takes an unusual black market drug. If you've seen the movie, you know how key the makeup is to telling this story. The Substance is one of only 7 horror movies to ever be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and Pierre-Olivier is nominated as well for Best Makeup and Hair Styling. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. How did you get your start as a makeup artist? I know it's an obvious question, but I want to know.
When I was 14, 15 years old, I used to have late and plaster for Christmas and clay. And I spent my teenage years making monsters in my bedroom, out of my bedroom, and trying to copy the great makeup from that time, like The American Werewolf in London, or I don't know, Gremlins, or the end of the 80s for me.
When was your big break? When you knew this is going to be a career for me?
When I was a teenager, at the end of the 80s, I knew that I was going to be a special makeup effects artist, and there was no doubt about that.
That is such a great thing to know when you're a teenager. You knew this is what you wanted to do.
Yes, that's I don't know if it's a chance. That's a big chance, yeah, to know. After that, it's lots of work, but that's a big chance. I agree.
When you first read the script for The Substance, what was your first reaction?
Well, there is a funny story, because the executive producer called me and he said, "Okay, I have that script with lots of prosthetics. Would you like to read it?" I said, "Yes, sure." But, they always say that, and sometimes, you end up doing just only a couple of things. So I said, "Yeah, sure, send it over." And then I read the script, and I was like, "Oh, that's incredible. That's terrific. I have to do that movie." So I was the one crawling back at him, saying, "Oh, I have to, please, let me do the movie." That was my start on the show.
How were the visual descriptions written into the script?
Some of it was so, for instance, for the monstro, the monster at the end of the movie, it was clearly written that Elizabeth Sparkle's face was stuck on the back of the monster with that terrible screaming face. That was written down, but it wasn't written that but she wasn't described apart from that. So it was a little bit of both worlds.
Sadly, I think I'm going to have to ask you to turn your camera off, because you're coming to us from France and you keep stuttering a little bit. So I have to say goodbye to you that way. But otherwise, We'll talk. My guest is makeup artist Pierre-Olivier Persson. He's the Oscar nominated for his work on The Substance. It's starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. You told the LA Times that you sat with the director for 3 days, just going over all of the different looks. What was helpful about that process?
Well, you read the script, but that's only a start. And then you really need to understand what's inside the director's mind. And words are just only the beginning. So, because sometimes you can have just a couple of words, but it's going to be like an epic sequence. Or sometimes you think something very big in the movie, but the director will say, it's going to last only a few seconds. Don't
Mm.
worry too much about that. So that was really important. And what I discovered is that with the director, Coralie Farja, I really want practical effects as possible. And that was the big thing I discovered. And I was like, after those 3 days, wow, that's going to be big.
It's interesting because so many of the effects are practical effects. Why was it so important to you and the director that the effects be mostly practical?
That's a good question. When after watching the movie, that when she was watching the movie, she wanted to touch what she was seeing on screen. And I guess that was why we did that way. That was the whole point, to have a very organic journey in a way. While watching the movie, it's all about flesh and I don't know, turning into weird things, and it's gooey and it's full of wrinkles and boobs and whatever. So yeah, I guess Carly wanted that plus to the to the movie.
Let's start with the back birthing scene where we see Sue sort of emerges from Elizabeth's back. That is Mark Qualley's character versus Demi Moore's character. Why is that the place you wanted to start? It was the first thing that you worked on, the back birthing scene.
Yes, that's correct. And that was lots of fun. I don't know, what can I say? We used different kind of makeup effects for that. We used silicone dummies. They were a bit like big realistic puppets, and we had raised sets, and with my team we were below the set, and we were puppeteering these dummies, or the rippling effect and the back splitting open and all that. So that was one part of the effects, and then we had really big prosthetics that we applied on the actress for all the stitching and the big wound and all that. So it was using different techniques depending on the shot.
For many of the shots, you created molds and scans of the actors in this film. What does that allow you to do in your work?
Yes, we used a little bit of everything. It's true. We used digital sculpting and scan and 3D printing, but we also used very traditional techniques. Regarding for instance, when you do, we used to do back in the days, we used to cast full bodies, and it's really difficult for the actor to stay for 2 hours and while people are trying to live cast your body. It can be a very difficult experience and very physical, and you don't want to put anybody through that. With scan, you can just, what we use is photogrammetry, and it's a system. You just take 200 pictures at the same time.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
That's fascinating. So you don't torture anyone.
Well, sometimes you do have to torture them. They have to sit as the molding is applied to them. It could take an hour. It could take up to 7 hours. What do you do with an actor for all of those hours where they have to sit there and they have to be still?
Yes, they do. When we apply all the prosthetics, when we glue the prosthetics, blend the edges, paint and color all these appliances, apply wigs and all that, it's quite time-consuming. That's true. And yes, they have to sit still. The best is when they follow what you're doing. Sometimes they can fall asleep, but sometimes you want them to be awake because you want them to close their eyes, look up for me and whatever. And we do breaks, obviously. And you have to be very aware of feelings. And if you can feel or sense that there is something wrong, or you just have a break, and sometimes you're gonna chat, and sometimes you're gonna feel that they want to stay in character. Anything they don't want to speak, so you just stick to your work, depending on the. Yeah, we are working on human beings, very sensitive human beings. So you also need to be careful. Sometimes we are so focused because it's so technical, we tend to forget a little bit about that, but you have to keep that in mind all the time.
My guest is makeup artist Pierre-Olivier Persson. He's Oscar nominated for his work on The Substance. So when Sue doesn't respect the balance of the substance, Elizabeth's body begins to show rapid aging. At first, it's a finger, and then it's more and more. What sort of research did you do into how the body begins to look as it ages, especially that finger?
Well, for the finger, actually, it was. I didn't research anything. It came naturally, and we had to find a balance between realism and fantasy. Coralie, we wanted the characters to be believable and the prosthetics to be believable, but also Coralie wanted to be free and to go crazy if needed. And so that was a fine line between that. So we researched the effect of aging on full bodies, on naked bodies. We looked for hunchback, real people, and we had spines. Then you feed yourself with all that, but then you try to come up with your own design. So some movies you're gonna have to do very realistic things but that movie we have that little fantasy license.
We got a call from a listener with a really good question. It says, how do you apply it the same every day so that there's no continuity issues ever?
That's a very good question. What we do is, you start with a live cast or a scan of the face, for instance. You sculpt the new character on top of the live cast. So, for instance, the Demi Moore makeup. And then we take molds of the sculpture. So from those molds, we are able to cast silicone appliances that we're going to apply every day on the actress. So if I have 40 days of shooting, I will be able to cast 40 sets of prosthetics from those molds and apply them. So the appliances are going to look exactly the same because they all come from the same molds. So each day the makeup is going to look exactly the same.
You know, there's a New Year's Eve sequence, and I'm not giving too much away, but body parts start coming off at one point. What went into creating that effect?
Which one are you referring to? Sorry.
For example, when her ear falls off. Her ear falls off.
Sorry, spoiler. It's my fault. I feel terribly guilty now. And what was the? You just try to do your best to glue down the ear and cover it with an appliance, and camera angle will help a lot.
In the final scene, as long as we're giving away spoilers, there's this giant monstro we see. This Elias Sue, maybe something else. This big creature. It's got body parts and face parts and all kinds of parts. Was there actually an actor in a suit for that sequence?
Yes. For the clothes, we had Margaret Qualley inside the suit. And for all the wide shots and all the well, the most complete, no spoiler, most complicated shot, we had a stunt double. So yes, it was a suit and a prosthetic makeup applied on her face.
It's interesting, though. I knew it was Margaret Qualley in the suit, but you can see it in her eyes. And I thought that was really interesting.
Precisely. I had lots of discussions with Coralie when we were prepping the movie. And I was like, okay, the suit is going to be difficult to wear. Maybe we should use the stunt double all the time. And Coralie was like, I want to use Margaret for the close-ups because it's really a performance, and the character, the monster is really tragic. It's what's happening to the character is really tragic at the during the movie, and she wanted to see her eyes. There's an eye. Yeah, she really wanted to see what the character was going through.
My guest has been artist Pierre-Olivier Persson. He's an artist and a makeup artist, I should say. He's Oscar nominated for his work in The Substance. Thank you so much for being with us. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. That was great.